In this tutorial, we're going to import an image and show you how you can create nice clean vectors over the top of it in order to outline the data in it using a combination of the guidelines and the node editing tools within the software. We're going to start with the picture you can see on the screen. We're going to load this in, and then we're going to use the guidelines within the software in order to help us sketch a set of vectors to create nice clean straight lines around the letters, and we're also going to draw an ellipse to create an outline for the part as well. Now we can see the finished set of vectors we'll end up with. In the companion tutorial to this, we're going to take these vectors and create some inlay toolpaths with them to make a little sign. So let's go ahead and open a new copy of the software. So let's start by clicking on the icon to create a new file. For the job setup, we're going to enter a width or X value of 11 inches, a height or Y value of 7 inches, material we're going to set up with Z0 on top of the block. Thickness of the material we're going to use for this particular part of the job is going to be 0.75, 3/4 of an inch, and we're going to set up the XY datum position in the center for the design part of this tutorial. Let's go ahead and hit OK. Next we're going to import the image that we're going to work with. So let's come up to the icon to import bitmap for tracing. And from the project folder C05, we're going to select the image us_buckle.jpg. When we import an image into the software, you'll see it's automatically selected, and if I click on it again, it will go into the transform mode where I can hover over the center here, click and drag to move the image around, or I can click into the corners and drag and resize the image dynamically as well. Also, if we wanted to, we could position it using the form options. So I could come over to Align Selected Objects, click on that, and click that I want to center that in the middle of the job, close. And also, if I wanted to, I could specifically set the size. If we click on the icon to set the selected object size and type in a value of 10, that will size the extents of the image to be that value, and in this case I have link XY selected, so the height will also change. We hit apply and close. For our example, we'd like to create nice clean vector outlines around the letters and around the oval shape. It would be good if we could use the automatic function to fit vectors to the image itself, but that very rarely will work well for a photograph. Really what that's suited to is computer generated artwork that has solid blocks of colour in it. Just to give you an example of why this wouldn't work very well with something like this, we can go into that function. So with the image selected, let's come over to Trace Bitmap. If we click on this icon here, we have some options in order to try and fit or join together areas of colour within the image to fit a vector around. If I reduce some of the colours in the image, we can see that at no time am I starting to get solid blocks of colour within the areas that I would like to fit a vector. If you're finding this a little too transparent, we can come and reduce the amount of fading if you want to see that better. For instance, in this case we've reduced these colours down, but if I was to start selecting some of these colours within the image and say that I wanted to fit a vector around those, if I click on preview, you can see that the vector I'm going to get is going to be really no use to me in this particular situation. So what I'm going to do is close this function, so I don't want to accept those vectors, and we'll go ahead and look at how we can construct some nice clean vectors manually within the software. To create vectors over my image, I need to be able to see clearly the detail in the image that I want to represent so that I can line things up visually. In this case, the image when not selected is quite faded, so what I'm going to do is select my image, I'm going to right mouse click, and I'm going to choose the option from the menu to go to Object Properties. If we click on this, what I can do is affect how much the image is faded when it's not selected. So I'm just going to bring this down to around 25% and hit close, and now I can see the edges that I want in order to create vectors on a bit more clearly. Now the first vector I'm going to build is my outline oval shape. And in this case, the best way to do that is just to use one of the standard shape functions from within the software. So I'm going to come over to the Create Vectors section and click on the icon to draw ellipse. And within here, I'm going to say that I'm going to sketch an ellipse roughly in position. And then what I can do is adjust some of the values within here. So I might say that I would like the center of the ellipse to be at 0, 0. I know that I'm centered within my part here. So if we hit apply, I can see that. And then we might want to adjust the height and the width. So if you want to get the same values that I'm going to use here, let's enter a width of 9.8 inches and a height of 5.9. And really what I'm looking to do is just visually see that outline is pretty close to the outline within the photograph. Obviously the photo is not going to be exactly an ellipse, the part itself may not be mathematically elliptical, and also the camera may have distorted it. So really I'm just looking to get as close as I can with that standardized shape. If my photograph was not centered at this point, I may want to move it around in order to get it centered and just get everything nicely lined up, ready to create my lettering. For the lettering to look correct, it's important that the vectors I create are in line where they're supposed to be, and also horizontally and vertically oriented where they're supposed to be as well. To help me achieve this, I'm going to use the guidelines that we have within the software in order to create a set of data that I'll be able to snap to when I start sketching vectors over the image. To create a guideline, you simply come down and click on the ruler at the top or on the left hand side of the 2D view, and you click and drag down, and you'll see that generates a line there, and that automatically will snap to positions as I drag it. You can see it indicates the position that it's snapping to there. When I let go, it will create this dashed line, and that is a guideline. So that's not a vector, but that is something that I will be able to snap a vector to. So this is just going to be used to help me construct my geometry. Now, as I mentioned, the default behavior is for the guide to snap, but if I don't want the guide to snap, I can just click and drag, and if I hold the shift key down, you can see it stops snapping to the particular values there, so I can position it anywhere. Once I position the guideline, I can also go onto it and click on it and move it again and reposition it if I want to. So in this case, what I'm going to do is construct a selection of guidelines, both horizontal and vertical, in order to pick out all the key corner points and straight edges within my two letters that we've got here. So what I would recommend is that you may watch me here, and then at the end of me constructing the guidelines, you might pause the video in order to then construct your own set of guidelines if you're following along. So first I'm going to do all my horizontal ones. So the next one I'm going to position just at the bottom end of the serifs on the U here. Then we'll drag another one down for this bottom edge of the S. Then we'll come down and drag one for this one on the S here. I've got one at the bottom, and I'm also going to construct one in here for this corner point on the S. I'm going to construct one in here for this corner point on the S, and I'm also going to put one in here for that bottom of the U, or the inside of the U there. So I think that's all the horizontal ones I need. We can always add more or change their position if we want. And now for the vertical ones, I'm going to click over on the left hand side ruler and we'll drag this out. And again, I'm just going to position these really just by eye. If I wanted to, as I'll show you in a second, I could right mouse click on any of the guides and very specifically set their position if I wanted to give them an exact value. You can also see here it's possible to prevent the guides from being dragged by locking them, to delete a guide, and also to create additional guidelines relative to the ones you've got on the screen here. So I'm going to continue to drag these across. You can see, so I'm picking up each of the vertical edges on the U, And then we'll do the same with the S. And I'm not going to worry too much about the extents of the curves. I'm going to have to manually edit the vectors in order to get those curves as I want them to look anyway. So for the moment, I'm just really worrying about constructing enough of these guidelines that I'll be able to snap around and create all the rectangular and straight edges basically. Because this is a photograph of a real object, a lot of the lines in it may not be perfectly straight or line up exactly. So as you're drawing something like the guidelines, or even when we're editing the vectors, you may have to make subjective decisions as to where you think best approximates what you can see in the image. At this point, if you are following along, this is where you may want to pause the video and go ahead and just make sure that your set of guidelines is in roughly the same positions as the ones that I've drawn in the part you can see. Now we're ready to start drawing our vectors. I'm going to come over to the Draw Polyline tool and click on the icon under Create Vectors here. And we're going to start sketching the vectors, snapping them to these guidelines. Now I can tell when the software is going to snap to a guideline by looking at the cursor. As I move the cursor over a vertical guideline, you can see I get a crosshair with a vertical line. As I go over a horizontal guideline, I get a crosshair with a horizontal line. And if I go over a point where they intersect, I get a crosshair that's got both the horizontal and the vertical lines. And I know that if I click when I can see that is going to snap exactly to the intersection of those two guides. So what this allows me to do is just carefully work my way around the guides that we've created, just clicking on the relevant points and creating my vector. And when I get back to the end, you can see that I get the icon that shows me there that that's going to close off that particular vector. So that's finished. And then we can come over and do the S. So again, I just need to pick a place to start. We'll start in this top right hand corner and work my way around, snapping to the guides. Now, as I get into the curved areas here, I'm just going to pick some points which are in the relevant spaces around the outside of the S, and then back, snapping on the guidelines for the straight part, then again come into here, and then finally close that off. Once I'm finished, I can hit close. If you're following along, you may want to pause the video at this point and create or finish creating your own set of vectors with the Draw Polyline tool. Once you've done that, we're ready to go ahead and start manually editing these vectors in order to get the curves to look right. Now at this point, I think it's probably worth me switching off the guidelines. I've used them for the purposes I wanted them for. Now they're probably just going to get in the way. To switch off the guidelines, we come up to this square where the two rulers at the top and on the left hand side intersect, and I can just click on that and that will undraw them. If I wanted to get them back, I can just click on it again. So just clicking on that square where the two rulers intersect will just toggle the guidelines on and off. So let's zoom in on the U. Come over to the zoom box icon under the 2D view control, click and drag a box that contains the U to zoom in on it. To exit the zoom function, I'm going to click on the selection mode arrow under edit objects. Next, I would like to change the fade on the image again so it's a little easier to see the vectors now. I'm going to click on the image, right mouse click and go to Object Properties, change the fade to about 60% and hit close. So now it's much easier for me to see the vector over the top of the image to edit the curves here. Next, I'm going to go into node editing mode to start manipulating these curves. So I'm going to click on the vector and come across and click on the icon here for node editing. I could also use the shortcut key N on the keyboard to achieve the same thing. Now what I want to do is adjust the individual parts of my vector in order to add some curves between these corners. To do that, I would like to convert them to Bezier spans, and that's a type of curve we have in the software. There are several ways to do that. One is to come over the span. You'll notice that the cursor changes as I get over the span to show me a little wavy line, and that means if I right mouse click, I'll get this menu which lets me change that span to a Bezier. Now notice if I do that on this same span here, right mouse click, that there's also the letter B, and that's the shortcut key for it. So as well as doing it from the right mouse click, I could also just hover so that the cursor changes like that, and on the keyboard I could hit B, and you can see that's added these extra handles in here. Do the same on this one, hover over it so that the cursor gets that little wavy line, and hit B on the keyboard to convert that to a Bezier curve as well. Now I can manually edit these by just clicking on these control handles and dragging them around. But in this case I would like to have tangential curves flowing through my corners. So the best way for me to do that is to align the control point with the main node. How I'm going to do that is select my main node by dragging a little box around it. I'm going to hold the Shift key down on the keyboard and drag a little box around this control point here. And what I would like to do is make that control point have the same X value, the same horizontal value as this node here. So if I hit X on the keyboard, that's going to drag that node across to align it with the first node that I selected, and that means that that curve will be perfectly tangential as it flows through there. I can do the same thing here by dragging a little box around this node, Shift, and drag a little box around this node, and in this case I want to align their vertical values or the Y-axis, so I hit Y on the keyboard to do that. What I'm able to do for each of these is the same. Select this, Shift and select this and hit X, select this, Shift and select this and hit Y, select this, Shift and select this and hit Y, select this one, Shift and select this one. Again I want to horizontally align these, so that's X. Here the same, hold and grab that node, hold Shift and grab this node, hit X, grab this node, hold Shift and grab this node and hit Y. Now that we've aligned these control points, I'm able to use the arrow keys on the keyboard to adjust the strength of each of these curves in order to get it to finally match, or very closely match, the image underneath. So for instance, if I wanted to come down and grab this control point here, I can use the down arrow on the keyboard just to increase the magnitude of that curve. Do the same with this point here. I can select that, use the left arrow on the keyboard to drag that out, and so I can just go around just using these arrow keys to adjust these up and down. I can even move the main nodes if I want, so I can grab multiple nodes in this case and just drag that down so that it better fits. And so you can just play around with those, with the arrow keys, adjusting the magnitudes, adjusting the node positions till each of these closely match your image. If I want, I can grab two at once or multiple nodes or control points. As long as I want to move them in the same direction with the arrow keys, that's no problem. So there we can see, if I want to go out of node editing now, I can come back across to the selection mode icon, or I could hit escape on the keyboard, and we can see that our vector is looking quite good now. Sometimes it can be useful to zoom out a little and look at the part in its full context. So if we come over and hit on the icon to zoom to fit under the 2D view control, and we may want to just click outside of the 2D view and have a look. And there we can make some final adjustments if we want. For instance, I think this probably wants to be a little less flat across the middle there, and I may want to just drag this side up a bit. So always worth making those adjustments while you're still working on a particular part. If we click on this again, go into node editing, what I may want to do is just grab this node in here, use the right mouse arrow to just jog that over, grab this one and use the left mouse arrow to jog that over a little. This one I'm just going to grab, use the up mouse arrow to move that up, move that down a little. Once we're happy with that, we can hit escape to go out of node editing. That's on the keyboard, and there I can see I'm pretty happy with the way my U looks now, and I'm ready to go ahead and start work on the S. Let's go over to the zoom box under the 2D view control and zoom in on the S here. Come over and hit the selection mode again, pick the vector, and this time we'll use the shortcut key of N on the keyboard. So the vector selected, I hit N, and the node editing mode should appear for that vector. What I want to do now is smooth out some of these nodes and then edit the curves manually. To smooth a node, I can go over it, right mouse click, and choose the option to smooth point. You'll also notice that that has the shortcut key S here, so if I click on that you can see it smooths it out, or as you saw there I could go over a node and hit S on the keyboard. In addition, I can smooth multiple nodes if I can sensibly select them, so I could grab all of these, go over one of them and hit S on the keyboard, or I can come in and just individually finish smoothing these. Now I can manually just start clicking and dragging and adjusting the control points on here, working my way around the part. You can see if I drag these along, it's possible for me to snap them horizontally and vertically. It may be that in this case I need to add an extra point in here to control this. We'll see. Maybe we'll drag this node down a little. Drag that up. I think I'm probably going to need another point in there. And again, if I want, once I've got things snapped into horizontal and vertical positions, then I can use the arrow keys on the keyboard. So you can see, essentially I'm just working my way around the part, adjusting each of these as I go. Again here we'll use the arrow keys just to jog that up a little. And you can see this can take a little while to work your way around and clean up all the areas, but it's definitely worth it because the more time and effort you spend to get these vectors nice and smooth and clean, the better result you're going to get when you come to actually machine them. So again, what I would probably recommend at this point is to pause the video and just carefully work your way around the S, using a combination of dragging the control points for the curves, moving the nodes around if you need to, and then also using the arrow keys if you just want to jog these up and down, and get it so that you're happy with the way the curve running around your S looks in your particular part. Once you're finished doing the node editing for this, again we might want to just hit escape on the keyboard, and we may want to zoom out. We can go zoom to fit, or the shortcut key for that is F on the keyboard. In this case I'll click the icon and we can just take a look and see if we're happy with the way that looks. So just a visual check, if you want you could select the bitmap, or you could adjust the fading on it to see if you wanted to move it a little more. I can see in there I think I'd like to just hit node editing and just jog that node over a little, hit escape and just take a look. And I think at this point I'm happy with the way my vectors are looking. Once we're happy with our finished vectors, we can go ahead and save the file. Let's go up to File, Save As, and I'm going to save my version of this in the project folder. I'm going to call it US_buckle-vector. If you wanted to, you could load that file in from the project folder and see exactly how my finished version looks. So let's just take a second to review what we've done in this tutorial. If you remember, we imported an image and we went ahead and drew an ellipse to create the outer shape for our particular design. Then we wanted to create some nice accurate straight vectors for the lettering, and so we dragged a lot of guidelines onto the 2D view over all the major intersections of the lettering we wanted to sketch, and then used the vector tools in order to sketch out the straight lines for those particular letters. We then went ahead and switched off the guidelines and worked our way through using the node editing and the tools we've got for adjusting the individual nodes, their smoothness, aligning the nodes in the X and the Y axis, and also jogging them around, both using the cursor keys on the keyboard and the mouse to click and drag them. That does conclude this tutorial, but if you want, these vectors will be used in the companion tutorial to this, where we're going to go ahead and create some inlay toolpaths and show you how we could cut out the U and the S and inlay them into a background part that would be the shape of the oval.